You never felt like you were too much. You felt like you were too aware. And that is a completely different thing. Most people will spend their entire lives never understanding that distinction, but you felt it. You felt it the first time you sat in a room full of people, laughing, talking, performing, and realized quietly, without any drama, that something was off. Not with the room, with the distance between you and the room. Like you were watching a film you hadn't agreed to be part of. Like everyone else had received a script and you were the only one standing there, reading it, and thinking, I don't believe any of these lines. That feeling never really went away. Did it? It just got quieter, more familiar. Like background noise you stopped mentioning because you stopped expecting anyone to hear it the same way you did. There is a certain kind of woman who never truly blends in. And I want to be very precise about what that means because it's not what most people think. It's not that she's difficult. It's not that she's cold or arrogant or socially broken. It's not that she doesn't want connection. She wants connection more than almost anyone. But she wants the real kind. The kind that doesn't require her to perform. The kind that doesn't require her to sand down her edges to fit into a space that was never built for someone like her. And those spaces are harder to find than people admit. This kind of woman, and if you're still watching, I already know you recognize yourself. She picks up on things, not because she's looking for problems, not because she's suspicious or paranoid, but because her nervous system is tuned to a frequency that most people don't operate on. She notices the shift in energy before anyone says a word. She hears what's underneath the sentence, not just the sentence itself. She watches how a person treats someone who can do nothing for them, and that tells her everything she needs to know. She feels when someone's warmth is real and when it's strategic, when a smile is genuine and when it's a mask, when a room is safe and when it's a performance. She doesn't look for these things. She just sees them, and once you see them, you cannot pretend you don't pay close attention here, because this is the moment most women like you stopped explaining themselves. You tried, at some point, to describe what you felt, to put into words that quiet, certain, uncomfortable awareness, and the response you got was something like, you're being too sensitive, you're reading into things, you're making it complicated. So you stopped talking about it, not because you stopped seeing it, but because you realized that explaining your perception to someone who doesn't share it is like describing color to someone who has only ever seen gray. The conversation always ends in the same place, with you feeling more alone than before you started. And that silence became a habit. There's a version of you from a few years ago that was more open, more available, more willing to pour herself into spaces and people and dynamics, hoping that if she just gave enough, showed enough, tried hard enough, she would finally feel like she belonged somewhere. You were generous with your time. You were generous with your energy. You were generous with your truth, which is the most expensive thing you have, and you gave it to people who didn't know what to do with it. And it cost you. It cost you in ways that didn't show up immediately. Not in one moment, not in one betrayal, not in one dramatic ending. It cost you slowly, in the accumulation of conversations that left you more drained than before they started, in the pattern of showing up fully for people who showed up halfway, in the quiet realization, which arrived like a cold morning, undeniable and clear, that most of the spaces you were forcing yourself into were never going to give you what you were looking for, because what you were looking for wasn't there. This is where it gets honest. And this is the part that nobody talks about openly. At your summit point, and you know exactly when, even if you've never said it out loud, you changed. It wasn't a decision you announced. There was no dramatic exit, no confrontation, no speech. You just got quieter, more still, more deliberate about where you put your energy and who you allowed into your inner world. The warmth didn't disappear, but the access changed. You became selective, and the world did not know how to respond to that. Because here's something almost no one tells you about women who stop blending in when a woman pulls back like that. When she gets quieter and more contained and less available, the world doesn't say she must be healing. The world doesn't say she must be protecting something valuable. The world says something is wrong with her. She thinks she's better than everyone. She's cold now. She changed as if change were a flaw, as if growing were something to apologize for. And sometimes the people who said it loudest were the ones closest to you. That's the part that cuts deepest. Not the strangers who misread you. Not the acquaintances who decided you were difficult. The ones who watched you become more honest, more boundaried, more to yourself, and called it a problem. Stay with this feeling for a moment, because this is important. The woman you became when you stopped blending in is not a broken version of who you used to be. She is a more complete version. The version of you that existed before had learned to fold herself into smaller shapes to fit into spaces that weren't built for her. And that folding, that endless, exhausting folding, was so normalized that when you finally stopped doing it, the people around you didn't recognize you. Not because you became someone else, but because they had only ever known the folded version. The real version of you is unfamiliar to most people, and unfamiliar things make people uncomfortable. That discomfort is not your responsibility. Here is something that almost no one says out loud. The reason you don't blend in is not a social flaw. It is a perceptual one. You perceive too clearly to perform comfortably. You feel too deeply to stay in dynamics that are hollow. You think too honestly to pretend that average is enough, and perception at that level is isolating. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because not everyone is operating at the same depth. Most social spaces are built for the surface. Small talk, light laughter, comfortable agreement, the kind of interaction that feels like contact without actually being contact. And you've sat in those spaces and felt the emptiness of them, the way they fill the room with sound but leave you feeling more alone than silence would. You have tried to participate. You've shown up. You've smiled. You've made the conversation easy. You've been the version of yourself that doesn't ask too much, doesn't feel too much, doesn't notice too much. And every single time you've driven home afterward, there was that feeling, that quiet, heavy, familiar feeling of I was there and I still wasn't there. That feeling is not loneliness in the ordinary sense. It is the loneliness of someone who has not yet found their frequency. It is the loneliness of depth in a shallow room. And it is one of the most specific kinds of pain there is, because it cannot be solved by simply being around more people. More people in the wrong frequency only makes it louder. And here is where most women like you reach the edge of something important. Because the pain of not belonging, of never quite fitting, of always watching the room instead of being in it, starts to sound like an internal verdict. Like the evidence is mounting that you are the problem, that your standards are too high, that your perception is a dysfunction, that the pattern, the constant feeling of being present but unreachable, visible but unseen, must be something broken inside you, because why else would it follow you everywhere? I need you to hear this clearly. It is not broken. It is designed. The same perception that makes you feel separate from certain rooms is the same perception that has protected you from the wrong people, the wrong decisions, the wrong versions of your life that would have looked fine from the outside but slowly emptied you from the inside. Think about the times your instinct said no before your logic could explain why. Think about the friendships that faded, not because of a fight, but because your body quietly decided it was no longer safe to stay open there. Think about the rooms you left, the invitations you declined, the dynamics you walked away from, and how weeks or months later, you understood exactly why that was not anxiety. That was not social fear. That was a precision instrument doing what it was built to do. You have been filtering your entire life, and the filtering is why you're still whole. Not unscathed, that's a different thing. You've been hurt. You've loved people who couldn't meet you. You've stayed too long in places that cost you too much. You are not untouched by any of this. But you are still here. Eschew honest. Still capable of depth in a world that keeps rewarding shallowness. Still able to feel, even when feeling has never been the safe or easy choice. That kind of survival is not passive. It is active. It takes something real to remain open at that level after being disappointed at that level. And the fact that you are still watching, still searching, still somewhere inside you believing that real connection exists, that is not naivety. That is one of the most quietly courageous things about you. Now let me tell you what blending in actually costs. The women who seem to move effortlessly through every social space, who always know what to say, who never make anyone uncomfortable, who seem to belong everywhere they go, they are not more evolved than you. They are more adapted. An adaptation, depending on what you're adapting to, is not always a sign of health. Sometimes adaptation means you trained yourself to stop noticing what you notice, to stop feeling what you feel, to turn down the volume on your own internal signal so you could stay comfortable in spaces that were never designed to hold someone like you. You never learned to do that. You tried, maybe, for a while, but the signal never fully turned off. And every time you tried to silence it, it cost you something. Your energy, your clarity, your sense of self, until eventually you had to choose between fitting in and staying intact. And you chose yourself. even when that choice looked like isolation, even when it looked like something was wrong with you, even when you weren't entirely sure yet what you were choosing yourself for. That choice, that quiet, private, costly, necessary choice, is the reason you are exactly who you are right now. There are women like you everywhere, sitting in their own silence tonight, feeling the same ache, carrying the same question, am I too much? Or have I just been in the wrong rooms? Wondering if the way they see the world is a gift or a flaw. Wondering if depth is a destination or just a different kind of loneliness. They are not broken. And neither are you. You don't blend in because you are not supposed to disappear. You are not supposed to dim yourself to keep others comfortable. You are not supposed to perform warmth. You don't feel or connection you don't believe in. You were not built for the surface, and no amount of trying will change your architecture. You are built for something real. And real takes longer. Real is harder to find. Real sometimes arrives in the form of emptiness before it arrives in the form of fullness. But when it arrives, when you finally stand in a room or sit across from a person or find yourself in a conversation and feel that rare, undeniable sense of, yes, this is it, this is what I was looking for, you will know immediately. Because you've been this precise your entire life. You were never the problem. You were always just waiting for something worth staying for. And that kind of patience, in a world that keeps offering you less than you deserve, that is not weakness. That is one of the rarest things alive.